Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Just going to start very quickly with a little bit of an introduction. There's a lot of hype in the press generally, particularly papers like the Mail, which I tend to read in my office, which talks about rents, which seem to be permanently onwards and upwards. And what I would just say is there is a recent study out which claims that since the crunch, the credit crunch, or just pre the crunch, rents in the UK have actually fallen on average by 2.4%. Yes, they are up in London and the South East, needless to say, but if you look at it on a sort of UK-wide basis, then they are somewhat down. And you start factoring in inflation, etc., it's perhaps something you just ought to be aware of. So all I would say is look before you leap, basically, and don't believe everything you read in the Daily Mail. Right, what I want to talk to you about this evening, or bring to your attention this evening, is actually Article 8 and the private sector. Now, there's bound to be a human rights lawyer in the room. He says, hoping there isn't. Good, thankfully there isn't. Right, what has all this got to do with potential investors and people like you? Well, if I just quickly précis Article 8. Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, entitled Right to Respect for Private and Family Life, states, 1, everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home and his correspondence. Point number 2, there should be no interference by a public authority. Well, there's going to be a major court case this month, and that could well set a precedent for the private rented industry, because that court is going to be asked to decide whether residents facing eviction from a privately owned property, not a publicly owned property, a privately owned property, are entitled to stay because of their human rights. Now, the Supreme Court has so far shied away from reaching a determination on whether Article 8 applies to private, but it does apply to public landlords. Now, by public landlords, we're talking about housing authorities, people like that. So, if the Court of Appeal agrees to this, private landlords and their agents, people like me, will have to take tenants' human rights into consideration before asking them to leave. And this could threaten the whole basis, basically, of the way the residential market is currently run. So if you want to keep abreast of that, come and talk to me afterwards, grab one of my cards. I've put some leaflets rather cheekily on the propaganda table that I've built at the back of the room there as well. So just to finish, hopefully on a bit of a high, the average tenant, believe it or not, today rents for 8 years. So if you're lucky enough to be one of those landlords, they will put approximately £50,000 and £200 rather, £50,200 into your back pocket over 8 years. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.